The entire contents of this podcast and website are based upon the opinions of Tammy Garcia and her guests, unless otherwise noted. The information on this podcast is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional and is not intended as medical advice. It is intended as a sharing of knowledge and information from the research and experience of Tammy Garcia and her guests. This is the Naturally Inspired Podcast, coming to you from our 1890 homestead in Johnstown, Colorado. I'm Tammy, and I want to thank you for joining us. Let's get started and help people feel good so they can do what they love for longer. Today on the Naturally Inspired Podcast, we are talking about fear. Given everything that's going on in the world today, I thought this would be a great time to kind of sit down and dissect fear a little bit. Holy smokes, guys, there's a lot of fear going on right now with the coronavirus and all the actions taken towards containing the coronavirus. So this is a great time to talk about fear. Just this morning, I got up and I did my regular routine and whatnot, and just, scrolling through my social media feed and popping onto a couple of news sites that I trust that I like to just kind of check in on to get updated. I was left just kind of feeling like, wow, this is an unprecedented time. Because of the way the things that are going down. And then I started thinking, well, is it though? Is it unprecedented? Because, we've been through SARS, we've been through pig flu, which I'm pretty sure that my family had actually. I think we did have that because that was like the worst body aches I've ever had in my life. But, we've had several outbreaks, epidemics, and, I think what's unprecedented is how we're handling this one. And I'm not the expert on coronavirus, so I'm not here to judge if we're doing the right things or not, because that's not my area of expertise. So what I am here to say, though, is that, what's the way it's being handled is definitely unprecedented. We haven't, canceled as many things as that have already been canceled before. So definitely this is an unprecedented events of the way we're handling the coronavirus. So because of that, I think there's just a ton of fear involved, because that signals, that we've never done this before. It signals to everybody that this is like very serious and maybe more impactful than the previous epidemics that we have, gone through. So that's what kind of got me started thinking about that, was just like, are the rates that it's not the same, fatality rates? Is that what it is that's different? But it's not really. What it is how we're handling it that's so different. And I've been wanting to talk about fear for a while, because I have my own opinions on how fear manifests in the body and how it can be so debilitating. So I thought that this would be a great time to do that. So we're going to be talking about fear here today on the Naturally Inspired Podcast. So starting out, I just want to kind of cover what fear is, right? I mean, we've all felt fear before, and we can explain the feeling that we get when we get scared and we experience fear. But what is that? So when you start breaking it down and reading articles about it, and, I'm super interested in it because I've been through several events in my life where I have experienced chronic fear. And I think chronic fear is a little different than anxiety. I know people who suffer from anxiety, but I think chronic fear is something that I identify with, not so much anxiety. I didn't have anxiety in the past, but I did have chronic fear. And when I say chronic fear, I mean, I had several events that were going on that caused me to experience fear on a regular basis for years at a time. Okay. So I started experiencing chronic fear quite young because my dad was an explosive alcoholic. So he was unpredictable and would have these outbursts, and we never really knew when they were going to happen. So that kind of started the ball rolling with my fear exposure as a young kid. I think the first time I can recall one of his explosions, I was like 5 years old. So we're talking 5 years old and exposed to, this kind of chronic fear, where I learned how to cope with fear with kind of built-in mechanisms on, just managing it. So it's been kind of very interesting for me as I've gone through life. I've had these time periods where they have been filled with a lot of fear. And so it's been an interesting topic for me to kind of dive into and discover, why I'm fearful, what happens when I experience fear, and then ultimately teach myself how to manage my fear. So this is such a great time to talk about this, because these types of incidences are not going away. We're going to be managing fear for the rest of our life. So if we can come up with a plan on how to deal with fear, especially when situations like the coronavirus arise, then we can be less impacted by it. So what happens when we experience fear is that we have a part of our brain called the amygdala, and it's a little almond-shaped section of our brain, and that is where we kind of detect fear. So that little amygdala kind of, looks at the situation and interprets it, and then that, along with other parts of the brain, triggers a fear response. So what we experience inside is a release of hormones, right? We release cortisol, and there's a physical effect to that. So our eyes become dilated, we breathe faster, our heart starts pumping, we actually push out more blood to the muscles, because theoretically we may need to flight, right? So our muscles get ready. So that's where the fight or flight concept comes into play, because you're having this response and then your body's actually preparing to run. So that's what's happening like on a physical level, and we experience these physical symptoms. However, it's interesting because there's more that goes on when we experience fear than just those physical symptoms. And chronically, there's even more that goes on. So when we're living kind of in a chronic state of fear for long periods of time, then it affects our health even more, because other things start to happen, right? When we're constantly in this state, we start producing, more hormones that lead to like inflammation and all kinds of other things. So it's interesting though, because we tend to separate the mind and the body. And I really feel strongly that we have to look at our bodies as a whole, and that when we experience something like chronic fear, it's really systemic. It's a systemic effect that it has on our body. We're not just, this head above our shoulders, right? We're not like living in our mind or our brains, and then our below the neck is our body. And I still think, although I think it's changing, I think there's a lot of movement towards the mind-body connection. But I still think that, people are thinking in a way like it's very isolated when they have something going on. And from all of the things that I have learned, I just think we need to move forward in a way that we look at the body as a system, and that things are systemic. So not only are we having a fear response in our brain, it's releasing chemicals, but it's affecting our whole body. If our heart rate goes up and our blood pressure goes up and our eyes dilate and, we experience maybe sweating or dry throat. I mean, how can we realistically say that that's a head problem and not a whole body problem? So it's really great if we start to be aware that, hey, our thoughts do affect our body. What we're thinking and our triggers, that the input that we're taking in does affect our body. And so what are some triggers for fear? I mean, they're different for everybody, right? There's some people that are afraid of snakes or spiders or what have you. And that triggers a fear response for sure. And it's a very immediate, like a predatory response of fear. But we also have emotional fear and psychological impact because of emotional fear. And our body doesn't really know the difference between, being attacked by a predator or emotional fear. It's having the same response, and we're releasing the same chemicals, and we're experiencing some of the same feelings. So when we look at input for fears, of course we have the predatory thing, but we also have, and it's unique to humans, whereas animals, I live on a farm and I love watching my animals, and I especially love it when I watch them recover from fear. That's taught me a lot, because my animals will get spooked or scared, and they run and they get startled, and then just seconds later they're just back to normal, right? They're just back to normal, like just completely unshooken. And as humans, we just don't recover that quickly from fear. So, or not only that, or we'll continue down the road and add more fear once fear's been triggered. So it's a very chronic cycle in a human compared to an animal who recovers quite quickly from fear. So there's a lot to be learned there. And I love experiencing, being on a farm and learning from the way our animals behave in that manner. It's pretty interesting. So when we talk about input, besides predatory input, we have all this input that's coming in to us. So the average person has 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. So think about that. That's a lot of thoughts. Add that 80,001. Think about that, because we're in a information age where we have so much information available to us at any given time. And we've almost become information addicts in a sense, because we carry phones with us everywhere we go. We want to know something, all we have to do is Google it. We want to look something up, it's right there at our fingertips. So we're constantly inputting. And unlike animals, humans have the unique characteristic that we can be stimulated into a fear state by things that we read, or things that we hear, or things that we're instructed on. So, for example, you can be scared of an actual dog, and that triggers fear in you because that's an experience that you've had. Say you've got, bit by a dog from a young age, then that's experience, and that can trigger fear in you when you see dogs because of your experience. But you can also be afraid of a dog because there's a sign on a gate that says, "Beware, dog is dangerous." Okay, so it's like, it's like just a million ways for fear to be inputted into us when it comes to the information that's out there. So we're unique in that way, that we're able to be stimulated into fear, not only because we see predators, but because we're inputting information and reading things and seeing things. So that's kind of interesting. And when you start to think about, what you're inputting, it becomes kind of like obvious that it's no wonder so many people are suffering from anxiety and living in a chronic state of fear in our world today, because of all of the inputting that we're doing on a regular basis, right? It's so interesting. So something as simple as monitoring what you're inputting can really benefit that feeling of chronic fear that we're living in. And how do you do that, right? How can you do that? We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. First, I wanted to just also talk about, so fear triggers that response, and we are having, that physical response. And then chronically, if we're living in chronic states of fear, we can then experience inflammation throughout our body. So we don't really know how fear contributes to inflammation, but what we do know, and all the science and research that I read on this topic pointed to this, was that when we implement stress management and fear management, we can lower levels of inflammation. So that right there tells us something, even though we don't know why fear and stress can contribute to inflammation. We do know that when we manage it properly, we use tools to manage it, that we can get those markers to go down. And so that's really interesting, I think, because that's a valuable tool to know and makes you think, well, this is definitely worthwhile. I know when we're talking about things like meditation, or, you need to take time out for yourself, and, the self-care thing, it's hard to get your mind around that when you're living in kind of like a fear state all the time. Like, okay, I just need to like relax and meditate. Well, that almost triggers more fear, right? Because you're like, I need to calm down. I need to, you kind of put this pressure on yourself. Like, I need to stop fearing. I just want to stop. But it's not that easy. It's not that easy just to stop, just to tell yourself to stop. And sometimes when you're starting out and you're wanting to meditate because you've read all these articles about how meditation can help you manage stress and all that, then all you end up doing is sitting there for 5 minutes worrying because you're not at the point yet where you can kind of stop those thoughts from coming in, because you're kind of on that fear train, right? And I can speak about this, and I feel people where they're coming from, because like I said before, I've had long periods of time where I've been kind of in a chronic stress state throughout my life. So, I had a premature baby that was incredibly stressful. She had to stay at the hospital, and I was very worried about that. So there was weeks on end kind of living in fear. There wasn't enough real information around her situation. So I ended up in a very high fearful state for, many weeks. Again, and, had a stressful situation with my son, also a health condition that was unknown. And again, I was thrown into this fear state. So, and then people tell you, don't worry so much. Don't be fearful. And I know firsthand when someone tells you, don't be fearful, you're going to make yourself sick. Okay, well, thank you. Because now I'm worried about myself getting sick, because now I'm worried about being fearful. So I completely relate and understand where people are coming from when they're on this train. And I think that that's why a lot of people, we don't like talking about fear in our society, because it's perceived as a sign of weakness. I think when we admit our fear, like, oh, you're not mentally strong enough to not be fearful. And that's just garbage, right? Because we all start out with fear. We're born into fear, because when we're born, we know we're not getting out of here alive. Right? Very shortly after, we're young when we realize, oh, there's life, but at the end of life is death. And so automatically that's creating fear in us. And then what we do as we grow up through society is we learn about things that, will hurt us, and we experience things that will hurt us. And so we kind of just build this, this inventory, if you will, of fear data points. And we continue to build them. And that's everybody. So to say, that someone's weak because they experience fear is just garbage, because everybody experiences fear. Now, here's where the variation is we can learn how to manage fear. Now, I don't believe in eliminating fear because, like I said before, that's telling someone, you know, don't be fearful, don't be fearful. And it almost creates more fear in you when someone tells you, don't be fearful. It's not that easy. But I believe you can't eliminate fear. You're always going to have some level of fear. And that can be a positive thing because fear can be a motivator. Where it starts to be negative is where it's paralyzing you, where it's keeping you from doing things, where it's inhibiting your true life's purpose because you're letting it control your decisions. So we can't ever eliminate fear, but we can learn how to manage it. And that's what I have done over the last, 15 years or so. I've had certain events in my life where I don't ever want to go through this again. How could I have managed this better? So I've seeked out different things, different books, different teachers, had mentoring, and figured out how to manage my fear the best that I can to get the best results that I can and come out of it, reasonably unscathed. It certainly, that doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen, but it certainly lightens your load when you have some tools in your toolkit on how to manage stress, right? People are still going to die. People are, think bad things are still going to happen. That's just life. But if we can get through these things with these tools and manage our fear a little bit, then, it really helps not magnify the fear or the issue that we're going through. So not only are we dealing with a physical response as far as inflammation, inflammation also, lowers our immune system because anything that is not vital to keep us alive, like our heartbeat or, our vital organs, that gets put on the back burner when we're in a fear state. So our gastrointestinal system slows down. Our immune system, right? That's not vital to our survival. So when we're living in a fear state, that also goes on the back burner, right? And right now, we need that, operating at peak state, because that's one thing that we can do to, give ourselves the best fighting chance when it comes to viruses or the flu or any illness that's going around, right? We want to give ourselves the best tools that we can to fight off whatever is going around, but especially right now, right? So the other thing that it can affect physically is your adrenal and thyroid health. And I think there's a lot to be said about that because people live in kind of like a low grade, stressful fear state from day to day by all this input that they're taking in and processing and not really managing on a purposeful level, right? And I know that, maybe it's not a normal concept to think like, hey, I have to manage my thoughts. I have to be purposeful about planting things throughout my day so that I don't end up in a state that's going to harm me. And that's kind of a different way of thinking because we're kind of taught to just wake up and kind of go with the day. Okay, I got to go to work. I got to go here. I got to go there. We're not really programmed to, be purposeful with our actions when it comes to what we're thinking. And what I'm suggesting is that we need to start being purposeful because we're on overload. We're on overload with input. And if we don't start to become purposeful with our thinking, then all this input is going to put us all into hyper mode where we're all struggling with anxiety and these kind of, revving high type medical issues. So it's a different way of thinking of it, but at first it may seem, like it's not natural to like monitor what you're doing, but then it becomes unconscious, and it's just kind of the way that you function. So we're going to get into some things, that you can just implement to really like tangible things that you can implement to kind of start toning down the fear. And the first thing that you can do that we kind of already mentioned is monitoring the input of what you're taking in when it comes to fearful things, right? Instead of, being inundated with, news feeds or even your social media feed. Like today, I was scrolling through my feed and I just saw so much fear on my social media feed. It was a bit startling, really. So much fear, and fear looks different for everybody. And I think that that's something that we need to kind of be aware of too. There's some people that are taking it really seriously, the coronavirus, as far as, even going as far as even getting angry because people are posting jokes about the coronavirus. And, we have to keep in mind that people are dying from it. And, we have to be respectful to those people, because how would you feel if it was one of your family members that died and then people were posting jokes about it? So I get that. But again, so there's anger and but the common thing that I saw really is fear, right? So even though you're posting jokes about it, or you're, talking about how you can resolve the coronavirus, I saw a lot of people talking about, different remedies and whatnot that you can use to stave off the coronavirus. And, to me, all that stuff is saying is, I'm fearful, right? I'm fearful because, there's some people who got on social media and wrote lengthy posts about the coronavirus who I have never seen on social media before. Like, I've never seen them post as much as a picture on social media. But today I saw them post quite a lengthy post about coronavirus. And that to me signals fear. If you're going to put yourself out there to express yourself about this, then that tells me this is something you're very concerned about and that you're very fearful about it. And so I think we need to keep that in mind when we're judging, how somebody's responding to the coronavirus, because ultimately, it's all really coming from a fear state. And I think we need to be, aware of that and not be so hard on each other, because I think we're all fearful of nobody wants to get the coronavirus, right? And nobody wants to have to deal with that. So, that's one way of looking at it, instead of, judging how everyone's reacting, to just keep in mind that just everyone's a little bit fearful. Some people are a lot fearful, and maybe rightfully so, given their circumstances. We don't know, right? So it's just one thing to kind of help not escalate the reactions that are going on, is to kind of just think ahead and think, okay, this is coming from a fear perspective. And I felt a little bit bad, just for how fearful people were. And just that's why I thought, we really need to do this podcast today, because if there's anything that I can put out there that will help someone, then I definitely want to do that, because living in a fear state is a horrible place to be, especially when you don't know what to do about it and you don't have many tools in your toolbox to deal with it, rather than just kind of dwell on it. And so that's what I wanted to offer up here today as we talk about it, is really some tangible tools that you can implement on managing your fear. So eliminating the input. So that means, watching your TV intake. I personally don't watch any TV. And over the weekend, we were in Denver and in a hotel room, and I accidentally turned the TV on, and good Lord, 30 seconds of TV. And I started like, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea that this is what was going on in the TV world when it came to the coronavirus. It was, anybody who's watching that a lot is in a mad fear state, because I don't see how you couldn't be the way that they were talking about it there on TV. So one thing you can do immediately is, I'm not saying don't be informed, but what I am saying is don't be inundated with news, because that is a 24-hour news cycle now. And that can just be a whole lot of doom and gloom and contribute to this chronic feeling of fear that you have going on. So, monitor your TV. It's easy to do because a lot of people put it on in the background, and I understand that, but that's all going into your head. So you got to make sure that you're aware of that. Second thing is news feeds. I have a couple of websites that I rely on, a couple of different people who I really trust and think are, not one-sided or the other. They're kind of down the middle. And so I can discern for myself. And so I check in with those guys, a couple times a week, but it's not every day. It's not every day. Because if I did check in on news feeds every day, I would be inundating myself with fear. Limit your phone time, even, your social media time and stuff. Like I said before this morning, going through people's feeds, I could just see all the fear there. And all that really does is, pass that fear on to me. The other thing about fear that we have to kind of remember too is it has social influence. Okay. So what that means is that when we can identify with one another through fear, then we build like a tribe on that fear. And, that can perpetuate more fear. Okay. So it can have some negative ramifications when we kind of build this, this tribe on the same fear. And in contrast to that, though, when you look at fear from a positive way, if we can identify that we share the same fear, much like going to a scary movie, and then we can identify fear in each other, and we find comfort in that. So if you've ever been to a scary movie, you see something scary, you're like really scared, and then you look at someone and they're just as scared, and then you both start laughing. Right? You break out in laughter because you're like, oh my gosh, we're sharing the same human emotion, and now it becomes lighter. So it can be a positive thing with social influence, but it also can be a negative thing. And so you have to really watch people and their response, and making sure that's not being overwhelming to you, right? It's not, their response isn't contributing to the negative social influence. When it comes to fear, that it's more of a positive influence, right? We can find positive in it as well. So those are some things that we can kind of eliminate or drastically reduce: TV, news feeds, phone, and people. Okay. Second thing we can do is practice being disciplined with our thoughts. And this is the part I was telling you that, it can seem a little unnatural at first, because you're like, how can I control my thoughts? I can't control my thoughts. I'm here to say, yeah, you can. You totally can. It takes a little practice. And again, you have to be purposeful with it. So you have to want to change this thought pattern, right? But I ask you, why would you not want to? Why would you not want to? You have to ask yourself, if you're resisting changing your thought pattern when it comes to fear, then you have to kind of analyze why you want to stay in that pattern. Fear can be a distraction. So a lot of times, fear's right now, right? I'm scared right now. I have to deal with this right now. Coronavirus is real right now. I need to react. I need to go do this. I need to go, do this. I need to be here. It's right now. So that means that I don't have to deal with my regular problems that are going on, right? Which could be, I don't like my job. I'm bored. I don't know what to do with my life. My kids are acting up. Whatever the norm is in your life, fear can be a distraction from that. And that's really important to kind of self-reflect that, hey, am I living in fear mode because I don't like what like regular life is? So, you got to get really honest with yourself. I think we all know some people, we would call them drama queens or whatever, that are constantly living in that mode of like, oh, what's the next crisis? Right? Well, we have to look at that and analyze, why are we always living in a crisis? Why do we always have a crisis going on? And if you're honest with yourself, you have to take data and realize, am I not happy with my life when I'm not in a crisis? Right? Am I not happy with my life when I'm not in a crisis? Do I use crises as a distraction from my real life? So that is something you really have to take a look at, because that's what fear can be. It can be a distraction. So practicing self-discipline with your thoughts means that you're purposeful. And in the beginning, like I said, it can be a little challenging and feel a little unnatural. Like, okay, that's weird. I'm not just going to I'm going to be purposeful about this. And when I say purposeful, here are some things that you can do to kind of, change the way those neural pathways tend to go when we get hooked on being in fear state or being in crisis mode. One of them is starting your day off right and using a gratitude journal. So placing a nice book by your bed, and every morning when you wake up, you start your thoughts off right by writing down things that you are grateful for. It's pretty hard to be in a fear state when you're thinking about things that you're grateful for. So allow yourself to just kind of roll into things that you're grateful for. And it may be now, depending on where you're at, that you are grateful that you're not sick today. You're grateful that you have all your limbs. You're grateful that you can walk. You're grateful that you have eyes to see, whatever it is. Start making a list every day when you wake up about things that you're grateful for. And that will kind of start your brain on the right path each day. Another thing you can do is when thoughts arise, have a plan in place. So like when you have thoughts, I'm telling you 60 to 80,000 a day. But when you have those negative thoughts that trigger fears, maybe right now you're fearful of the coronavirus. So when you start thinking about the coronavirus and, okay, what happens and what's going to happen when I get the coronavirus? This is what's going to happen. And I'm going to get sick. And this is, and you kind of start down that thought process. You have to stop the pattern by bringing something else into your thoughts, right? So changing your state. So if you start that process of thinking in that way, you can put on a piece of music that you love. So, everyone carries their phones nowadays in your car, wherever. Decide that, okay, when I start going off and worrying about the coronavirus, I am going to put on a piece of music. I'm going to listen to Prince. I'm going to listen to whoever it is that you love, right? But you have a pre-made plan in place. So it can be music. It could be a book. Maybe there's a really great book that you love and there's a certain chapter in it that you love, and you can rely on that. So you can carry that with you. And when, those thoughts start rising up into fear, you pull out the book and you start reading. Okay. Another way you can do it is comedy clips, right? Laughing is just such a great antidote to fear. So if you have a few YouTube clips that you think are hilarious, certain comedians or what have you, get those ready. I mean, I have a couple that I have watched over and over that just every single time they make me laugh. And I know, everybody has those. So use those as tools. When you start going down that road of worrying and feeling fearful, pull out your phone, pull out those clips and have yourself a laugh. It really does work. I know it sounds crazy, but it does. Another thing is animals. Animals can really help with fear. A lot of people love cat videos. Anything, anything that you can imagine that you can come up with. Start making a list of things that you love that you can rely on as tools to eliminate that fear. Another whole category is physicality when it comes to fear, right? Fear is energy, right? A lot of it's energy. We experience this physical transition when we are in a fear state, and that's energy, and it gets pent up, right? You're just like, oh, you just got to move around because you're just, butterflies or just that kind of anxious feeling. So a great antidote to that is exercise. So if you're not already exercising, implementing exercise into your regular daily life can have a huge impact on your fear. Huge impact. So getting moving, and it doesn't have to be running a marathon, right? We're just talking about movement in general. Going for walks, practicing yoga, kickboxing, running. I mean, there's a million different ways to get active, and that can have a tremendous impact on your fear. So those are some really great ways that you can practice that. Another thing that you can do, practice is really breaking down, components of fear. So demystifying it, right? So one of the tools I use, and I think it was Jane Fonda that said it, and I'm not even a huge fan of Jane Fonda, but I loved what she said. She said that whenever she's fearful of something, she dives in and learns everything she can about it. And I so related to that because back when I was a teenager, like there was really popular movie, Nightmare on Elm Street. Now I'm totally dating myself. But anyway, I was freaked of that movie when I was like 12 and 13. 12, I think it was, when I had gone to a sleepover and first saw it. And it was terrifying to me. I was terrified by it. I think what it was is in our brains, there is a kind of balance when it comes to fear. So there's this like balance of excitement versus control. And somewhere in the middle is when we don't, completely lose our minds. But when we don't have control and we're not really sure what's going to happen next, that's when we start to get terrified. So take a movie like Nightmare on Elm Street, right? I think for me, it was the dream element, because in that movie, people got killed in their dreams. And we don't really know what happens to us when we dream, right? That's kind of like an unknown area for us. So I think that was the scary part for me now, if I look back on it. But one day, after I had been terrorized by these movies because they were so popular with all my friends for months, I happened to see the making of Freddy Krueger on TV. And what it was is it was the actor without any makeup on, and slowly they went through and they showed all of the makeup that goes into Freddy Krueger. Boom, done. No longer afraid, right? Because it was demystified for me at that point. I saw exactly what was going on, and the whole thing was debunked. I could watch them after that forever. They no longer scared me. But take a movie like The Exorcist, right? People were terrified of that movie when it came out, running the theater, crying, and all sorts of chaos when that movie came out. And it's still, I think, one of the most frightening movies out there today. And the reason why is because our brains can process that with excitement, but there's no control, because we don't really know if that could happen or not. There's this maybe it could happen, there's just this unknown. And so that's where our brains kind of balance this dance, if you will, of excitement. And that's why people like to go to horror movies, because they're kind of exciting. And if you can, share being fearful with your friend, with the social influence, and then laugh about it, then it's a pleasant experience. But if you get to the point where your brain has no control over the excitement and you don't really know where it's going, then it can become a terrifying negative experience, right? So demystifying things can have a huge impact on your fear. So in terms of the coronavirus, educate yourself a little bit. Don't inundate yourself, right? And I was reading somebody who's so couldn't be more true today, had posted something like, I don't know what to believe. I read this over here and this says that, and I read this over here and we're all dying tomorrow, right? And that's so true because everyone has their opinions on it. And depending on, your own fear state, your opinion that you're putting out is kind of in that filter too. And yes, there are experts, and I definitely encourage you to when you're educating yourself, make sure that it is a reliable source. And also look at people's stories. It's such a great way to kind of demystify it. I watched a video of someone who has already tested negative after testing positive for the coronavirus. And that was really enlightening. He described his whole experience with it. And that was super enlightening because it demystified my fear, right? You get a real feeling for it. So I would encourage you to do that. Be curious, discover, start looking at your fear a little bit like a science project, right? So we can move it over to the data side of it, if you will, instead of so much on the emotion side of it, right? And after you've educated yourself, make a plan. Get a plan together. Right? I'm the type of person that, I just want to know, like, let's just rip the covers off this and figure out what we would do if this happened to us. Oh my God, what would we do? And having a plan in place is huge, right? Because I feel like even when you put a plan in place, the chances of it actually happening to you lessen, right? Isn't that Murphy's Law, right? Like, I'm prepared now, so it won't rain today because I have my boots and my raincoat, right? Isn't that kind of the way it goes? But in all seriousness, having a plan lessens the burden of fear. So make a plan. What would we do? Where would we go? Who do we call? What action steps are we going to take, right? And reasonably so, right? We don't need to go crazy in this department because it has not happened yet. And that's something you need to keep in mind when you're putting a plan together. Do things that make you feel proactive, right? Fear is perpetuated by inaction. So when we sit and we feel like we're sitting ducks and we're not doing anything, we're just kind of waiting and seeing, that can escalate fear too. So do things that, make you feel proactive. If you haven't started, eating healthy and exercising and living, an optimum lifestyle, then start now. That will be a great focus to start focusing on that. Not only it will ease your fears because you're doing something to be proactive regarding the virus, but ultimately that can be a habit that you stick with long term. So now's a great time to start, right? So get moving in the direction of being proactive. So exercise program, eating healthier, start reading positive things, right? Read positive things about, biographies or personal development. Feed yourself with positivity rather than a constant diet of negativity. Okay. Immerse yourself in light things. Be purposeful about it. If you're going to give yourself so much time to read the news and live in that space to be informed, not inundated, then purposefully plant time to live in the light, right? In motivating, inspirational content, podcast, books, wherever you're getting your positive material. Be purposeful about planting time in your day for that. Another thing you can do is research a vitamin and supplement program, right? I mean, there's some great things that you can implement into your life as far as helping you with the physicality of fear, herbs, Magnesium helps with relaxing muscles. There's all kinds of different information out there. And once you get going on that, wow, it becomes really interesting. So that would be a great way to spend your time being proactive to research vitamins and supplements that can help you personally, individually. What are your issues and what can you do about them with vitamins and supplements? So a great way to feel like you're doing something towards your health and to be proactive. The final way that you can do that thing that you can implement is help someone else. And, when we're in a fear state, we tend to become obsessive about the topic that's making us so fearful. And we can dwell on it. And it can become, the large part of our thinking for the day, every day. You can get out of that, off that train, if you will, when you focus on helping someone else. And maybe that person, doesn't have it as great as you right now. And by focusing on their situation and helping them, you take the emphasis off yourself, right? And I mean, I know we're all, especially as parents, we're worried about more than just ourselves, right? We're worried about our kids. We're worried about our elderly parents. There's a lot. I'm not saying that we're all just stuck on ourselves and stuck in fear for ourselves, but, getting outside your circle and focusing on someone else can be super helpful when it comes to fear. And, I'm not talking, all of these tactics can be applied to any type of fear you have, especially if you're experiencing chronic fear. So they're really life skills that you can use and tools that you can use throughout your life. When you focus on someone else, you can just take the burden off of you of worrying about yourself and your own things and escape into helping someone else. Such a gratifying way to do that. So really quick to kind of recap, because I want to make sure that we don't miss anything here, because I want you to really benefit from these tactical things that you can implement today. The first thing was to eliminate or drastically reduce, right, the input of fear coming in. So whatever modality it is, right? TV, news feeds, phone, people, whatever you're taking in, purposefully eliminate or drastically reduce that negative input. Okay. Second category was practice being disciplined with your thoughts. Be purposeful with the way you're conducting your thoughts throughout the day. So you can implement, gratitude journal, starting off the day right. Have a plan when thoughts arise that you're going to change the state and not get on the train of fear that goes on for hours and hours, right? You can use music, a book, you can laugh, you can watch cat videos. Whatever it is going to bring in a different feeling and eliminate the fear at that time. Okay, third thing is physicality. So exercise. If you haven't already implemented exercise, now is a great time to start. If you're experiencing fear, go exercise, because that energy can be burned off, because that's what you're experiencing is energy, right? So fourth thing is demystify, right? Part of fear is inaction. So when we educate ourselves about whatever we're fearful of in a, controlled way, where we're not inundating ourselves with information, but we're taking in the right amount of information from the right people, right? That's key. We demystify our fears, right? We can eliminate a lot of things. And yet, the other day I was watching something, and just by accident, I learned that specifically the coronavirus is not affecting children that much, right? It's like the lowest rate of fatality and the lowest impact age group is children. Well, what a gift that was, right? I wasn't even purposefully looking for that, but having that piece of information now, I know as a parent, it's a little bit relieving. So education can be power as long as you're getting the right education from the right people. Make a plan, okay? Having a plan and knowing what you would do drastically eliminates fear, okay? being proactive, right? Start doing things towards feeling like you're doing something. Somebody I was listening to from the CDC the other day was talking about washing hands. And, one of the reasons why the CDC says to wash your hands is because they know that people want to do something. So it's almost like they have, it's not enough to just, we're such an instant gratification society that it's not enough to tell people, hey, there's not a lot you can do, right? You got to eat right. You got to sleep. You got to, exercise, stay healthy, all the things that you would normally do. People aren't satisfied with that. So they have to say, and wash your hands, wash your hands. And so now people are out washing their hands. And yeah, it can dramatically reduce the passing on of a virus. But this particular virus is mostly passed on through the air. So it's passed on through breathing in. Someone's breathing out the virus and other people are breathing it in. So they're telling you, admittedly, the CDC said that we're telling you to wash your hands to give you something to do. So that, right there, when we're active, we're feeling proactive, we're reducing our fears. And so immerse yourself in things, that will add to the positiveness of making yourself feel less fearful. So eating healthier, read positive things, be purposeful, plant purposeful activities throughout the day to help you feel less fearful, right? And the last thing was focusing on someone else, right? Volunteering your time to help somebody else. Think about someone else's problems for a while, right? It lessens our own fears and takes the focus off ourselves. So I really, truly hope that some of these, tangible things that we've talked about today, you can implement and get started on right away to help you lessen the burden of fear. Because, fear has a great impact on our daily lives. It can paralyze us. It can motivate us. But if we don't learn how to manage it, it can impact us very negatively. Physically, mentally, we can miss out on a lot of things if we are living in a chronic state of fear. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Naturally Inspired Podcast today. I am grateful that you show up every week to listen, and I hope that these tools, you can use them, and I hope that they help. And that's all we have this week on the Naturally Inspired Podcast. If the Naturally Inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the Naturally Inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.